Thank you so much. We have a very, very special guest, one of my favorite ultra marathon sustainability nerds that I have known for a while, who takes on incredible challenges for everyone and also for herself. So, for those of you that are not familiar with B. Lorraine Smith or Bonnie Lorraine Smith, just tell the audience that's listening live and those that will listen to the replay who you are, what you do, and what was the fork in the road that forced you to take the path less traveled.
Sure, I'm happy to. And first off, Robert, thank you for having me back. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and I really appreciate the provocations that you bring to this wider community. So thank you very much for giving me a chance to chat with you again. And thank you
Your
to
buddy Glenn Frommer is listening in live.
Oh, hey, Glenn. Great to see you here. And I was also just going to say, Robert, thank you. I think most people who are hearing this already know this, but in case anybody just came off the back of a truck, thank you for all you've been doing for decades. I really sort of walk or stand on the shoulders of giants like you who've been provoking and taking the road much less traveled for much longer. So I'm very grateful to participate in this conversation and to share what I can. So I'll briefly introduce what I'm up to, and it's a little different than the last time I was here. It's a constant evolution, and why I'm doing this. So as you said, I'm Lorraine Smith. I'm coming to you live from Montreal, Canada. I am an independent advisor, coach, writer. I do some public speaking as well, like this. And I do all that I do in service of my vision. And I want to say a little bit about my vision and then sort of back into, so what does that mean and what do I do about it? I hold a vision of an economy that works in service of life. And by that, I mean that all businesses, all economic activity in every industry, across all regions and at all scales, enable life to thrive. They serve life. That is the purpose. And I'll just characterize that a little bit further. One, just by noticing what happens when I say that to some of my more sort of senior industry friends, because I've tested this a fair bit. Usually there's laughter, like a kind of like, well, we got to be realistic, right? Like, the economy has a bunch of things to do. And then there's this kind of like, oh, wait a second. Yeah, why wouldn't the economy serve life? There's this awareness like, oh, yeah, that's kind of what we're here for, is to be well. And then the other thing that I noticed, having been, as you mentioned, in the ESG and sustainability trenches for some time, about 20 years, most companies, even those with very clearly stated purposes, are nowhere close to serving life, even if their purpose sounds pretty good. So you've got, say, a company like Google, stated purpose, I'll paraphrase a little, but it's something like making all the world's data accessible to everyone everywhere. That sounds like a pretty good purpose, but how they actually make money is by selling advertising. Or you've got a global food company like Danone, whose stated purpose is something like bringing people health through food. Again, that sounds like a pretty nice thing. I like food, I like health, but when you look at how they make their money, it's by selling a lot of relatively processed foods made from conventional agriculture that is quite industrialized, having a lot of negative impacts on soil, on human gut health, in single-use packaging, the vast majority of which is, although it may be recyclable, it is not recycled. It is being incinerated, landfilled, or littered. So the way they make money is by doing things that actually aren't really bringing us that much health. They may in some ways, but the net effect is not making us healthier as people, able to live well, look after one another, and be in a kind of ecological context that enables us to thrive while bringing about the thriving of other life. And so when I say I hold a vision of an economy that works in service of life, I literally mean that is what I see. An economy that works in service of life. And so I kind of wander through this world looking at what businesses do, what they say they do. So looking at their mostly they're public disclosures, because having spent 20 years in ESG and sustainability, I'm pretty good at finding disclosures and kind of comparing them, seeing what they actually say. And then asking, well, how close is that to serving life? Is it undermining life? In what way? Why do I think that? What do others think? And sort of interviewing other stakeholders and finding out what's the gap, what's missing. And I can give some more concrete examples if that would be useful, but that's sort of my basic premise is I see this economy, I really like it, and then I experience the one that's happening right now and I notice some differences, and I seek to find places where this new, better, more life-affirming economy is emergent, understand those elements and explore them as best I can, and look at what's not working, and really just put kind of evidence and opportunities into the ether to enable more people to make decisions that serve life. I'll just put one finer point on that, and then we can talk about the fork in the road if it's helpful. I want to just get really clear on what I'm trying to change, because there's a lot to do out there, right? Like the economy is a big thing. There's a lot of industries. Even if you just took one industry, food or tech, there's a lot to do. These are complex, they're global, multiple levels. So my role that I've chosen, and it's ever evolving, but I need to prioritize, the role that I've chosen for myself is to change people's worldview. And what I mean by that is to bring people across the threshold from never having thought about an economy that works in service of life before. Most of us don't bump into that. We're not educated to think that way. And enable people to have that thought. And I've actually seen it be very powerful when people realize, oh yeah, that's actually a way I could think. I could at least have it as a kind of inquiry. Just making that shift that, yeah, the economy really ought to serve us, not the other way around, not people being trained to serve the economy. Just that threshold, I consider significant and especially important if people who move billions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of jobs, if they begin to hold that as a lens or a source of inquiry, what becomes possible? So that's the job I've given myself, but I see lots of other possible roles and changes that we could seek out. So yeah, I'll just pause there because I'm kind of monologuing a little. Where do you want to dig, and what more can I share?
Well, I wanted to touch a bit. You came up with this supernatural term called materiality, which kind of kept me thinking about Rod Serling and the Twilight Zone. So what do you mean by materiality rather than materiality?
Yeah, sure. So, well, I mentioned that I've been in the ESG and sustainability trenches for a long time. So let me put a little bit of color commentary to that, and then that'll explain why I needed to bust out and get more involved in reality. So as a sustainability consultant, I worked, I had 2 day jobs during those couple decades. One was with CBSR, Canadian Business for Social Responsibility. Folks in the US probably know BSR, but there's a CBSR. And so I worked there for a number of years, and then I freelanced, and then I moved. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada. And in 2009, I moved to New York, and I was continuing to freelance, and then I got engaged and hired on at Sustainability Inc., the company founded by John Elkington, although he wasn't there. I did go on to collaborate with him at Volans. And actually, Glenn, that's how I think you and I first crossed, as I used to manage the network of, there was sort of a member-based network at Sustainability. And then I went back freelancing. And in those 20 years, I'll just kind of amalgamate what I did during that time. And there's a set of activities that kept me pretty busy and got me paid. The number one kind of time occupier was developing sustainability strategies. So that would be working with large companies, usually one-on-one, like a project team from the group I was with, or as a freelancer, I get brought onto a team, and the individual company. And we would be working with them to set their sustainability strategy. And that would usually be cross-functional. So it'd be looking at social, environmental, governance. It would be looking at their supply chain, maybe their product, depending on the type of company. I worked cross-sectorally. And I did this when I was in like a day job and when I was freelancing. So I worked with global banking, transportation, farming, tech, forestry, energy, oil and gas, coal, kind of you name a sector, I probably worked with them. And even some of the really fascinating ones where you go behind the scenes, like the flavor and fragrance industry. I did 3 different strategy projects for a couple different companies in flavor and fragrance. And when you go in there, you realize like, whoa, industry is making decisions about something as simple as why we pick a shampoo, right? And I'll just put a little dot there, like, yeah, what the heck is shampoo, right? Like, why are we buying these single-use packages, smearing weird stuff on our heads every day, and thinking we're like better looking because of it? Well, a big part of it is because the molecules in those things have been designed to evoke a certain feeling, and scientists are amazing. So anyway, I got to go backstage with a lot of sectors, helping them set goals around their social and environmental impacts. That was one main activity. Another main activity that I did at that time was what we would call stakeholder engagement. So I would be either directly interviewing, so doing one-on-one interviews, asking for input or opinions or expertise, or maybe I'd be facilitating a group conversation. Maybe that would be internally with a cross-functional steering committee looking at sustainability, maybe bringing external stakeholders in. I'm very fortunate to speak a couple other languages other than English, so I'm able to facilitate in Portuguese. I lived in Brazil long ago and have gone back and forth, so I'm a Portuguese speaker. I'm also a French speaker, so I would get engaged to do facilitations in French and Portuguese. So a lot of listening to different people is what I think of stakeholder engagement being. So that's kind of the second thing that I did a lot of. The third thing that I did a lot of was what we would call reporting or transparency. And I first got into sustainability as a field in 2003. So anybody listening will probably be familiar with things like the GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative. It was born a little bit before I came on the scene, but in 2003, I remember doing a benchmarking exercise where we were looking at how many companies were producing CSR reports in Canada at the time. And it was a tiny number. Like, I think there were 8, Well, now fast forward to today. And of course, there's a lot of reporting. Most companies that are big enough to be paid attention to by a wider audience are reporting in some way, shape, or form. So the GRI was just hatching. I've been around long enough, as probably many of your collaborators and community members have been, to remember when the MDGs became, they sort of retired and along came the SDGs. If we have time, I'd love to explain why I think the SDGs are part of the problem. I remember the TCFD being born and thinking like, this is it, and now of course we have the TNFD. So each phase of a SASB coming online, integrated reporting. I remember going to an integrated reporting kind of launch in 2013 in London. And I turned Margot, who's, hey Margot, if you're listening, and Glenn will know Margot too. I remember turning to Margot and saying, this is the meaning of life. Like, I really thought, integrated reporting, finally, we're really holding the whole thing. We're listening and we're bringing in information and we're sharing, like, what is our purpose? How do we work? I even loved the octopus diagram of the business model and all the value flows, capital flows. So like, I've been there, done that in the reporting and disclosure space. This is my long-winded answer for how did I come to materiality. Having done many projects, strategy, stakeholder engagement, transparency and reporting across many sectors in a few languages, not that many, but enough to get a pretty good random sampling of the industrial scene, I found there was this bizarre absence of reality. So in the mix of that was a lot of materiality assessments, right? And I'm guessing your folks know what those are, and if not, we can always fill in some blanks. But a materiality assessment is kind of a combination of the strategic thinking, like, what are we trying to do? We got to talk to people. We got to get some engaging, get some listening going on, and then we got to figure out the nuts and bolts of what we're going to disclose. So we look for, in a nutshell, a materiality assessment is looking at what are our most material issues, what's most relevant to this company to pay attention to. and to tell our stakeholders about. I lost count about how many materiality assessments I've been involved in, either conducting them, like being the lead consultant or a player on the team, or being a stakeholder. So sometimes I was on the interviewee side of the fence, giving perspective, but many, dozens. And what kept showing up for me is like, reality was missing. Like we would talk, for instance, and I won't throw any specific company under the bus because this is not unique to one sector or one company. This is a kind of global challenge where we would conduct these assessments, and they were not cheap. I mean, the cheapest one I think I ever saw was about 40 grand US. So it's not a ton, but it's not nothing, right? Like if you or I was handed $40,000, we could probably do something cool with it. And sometimes they ran over $250,000, depending on how many interviews and the depth of this and that. And we would pull together all this information. We'd create this whiz-bang slide deck. I mean, a lot of effort goes into the slides and making them look good. And then we'd present usually to some kind of cross-functional executive team. Sometimes they would know why they were there. Sometimes they would just be like, what the heck? And we would debate, did we put climate change in the right place on the 2x2 matrix? Like, shouldn't it be higher than human rights? No, human rights should be lower. Well, what about conflict minerals? And we'd be debating the placement of these issues. We would say over and over, well, it serves as a strategic discussion tool, but never did I see. And by the way, like I actively say this anywhere anyone will listen to me. I would love to be wrong. Please tell me where you see a different version of this, because I never saw the outcome of that exercise, a materiality assessment, being meaningful change on the ground for the people who were most impacted by the decisions of the company. And by meaningful change, I mean like their lives were improved. Like maybe some kind of like better compliance around human rights was kind of jammed through the supply chain. But let's think about that for a moment. That's like saying, yeah, we looked around to see where we were causing egregious harm. And we tried to like notice it, track it, and stamp it out. Like, okay, but how about noticing where your business model is predicated on probably having some egregious harm in your supply chain and thinking, what's a better way to go about delivering this value? And, that's a great big question. Lots of possibilities there. Point being, I did not see reality in materiality assessments. I saw a lot of slides moving around. I saw a lot of money being spent, a lot of consultants being really busy, not being allowed to touch the business model, not being allowed to genuinely question who is centered in this decision-making process, and where can we genuinely understand how we might be undermining life and its ability to thrive, human life and the more than human world, and where could we look for ways that by creating this value, we really generate a life-affirming outcome. And so there came a point where I didn't want to be that like kind of annoying consultant, either within my own teams. Like I think I was probably a little complicated to collaborate with, and bless the many folks who I had the good fortune to collaborate with, many of whom are still really good friends. But I think I was also kind of undigestible by the clients. Like I remember a number of times where the client, like the direct client that we're working with day to day, the person that we're emailing with and talking to, would say to me, yeah, I totally hear you. That's a really good idea. I think for this round, we'll just keep it the way we're doing it, but maybe next year we'll be able to build more of that in. And then next year I'd be like, remember when we were gonna, like, reality was, and who's centered and how does the impact, and then there came a point, quite literally a moment, Thursday, October 21st, 2021, where at the end of a very long run, I realized I'd been holding the question of like, what is my role in this? And when do I change it rather than continuing to complain about it? And it was that moment. And I stepped away and said, my role is to do what I think we need to do. And it evolved actually in conversation with a former client who was used to be the lead ESG transparency person for a team that did the reporting for one of the world's bigger banks for about 5 years. I was the lead, I think 5 reporting cycles I was on their reporting team, and I got to be pretty good friends with one of the main people. And I had a really candid conversation with her about this challenge. And she said, yeah, you're like trying to put reality. I was like, there's no reality in materiality. It's driving me crazy. She's like, yeah, you're trying to put reality back into materiality. And I was like, maybe I just need to spell it differently. And so I did. And then I was like, well, how would I conduct a materiality assessment if it was about reality? And I set out to do that. And I've been working on a version of that for the last 2 years.
But you made a conscious decision. You had that fork in the road saying, I'm done. I tried teaching you guys materiality. You're not interested. So I'm out of here. But you were always critical, but always incredibly polite. I was always surprised. I mean, like I'm, always cursing people out for doing obnoxious behavior and telling them, "Wow, your kids are really ugly," uh,
Mm,
or what they're doing. But you always remain polite, chill. At the same time, you completely walked away from the industry that you were part of and trying to change. Have you given up on changing them and say, you know what? I'm not going to play this game anymore. I'm going to find my own game.
mm. Yeah, I guess it kind of did do that. Hey, David, great to see you. Yeah, parents, maybe because I don't have biological children of my own, I'm able to be a little more lighthearted on the topic. Um, Let me just check. Is there a specific question? Thomas, cool. Good to see you folks here.
Your
Really,
fan club is here.
yeah, nice. And Bobby, tell me, is there a specific question lurking in there that you want me to
No, well, it's because having done the work that we've done for over a quarter century and
Mhm,
before that starting, very few people in who are in positions of power or well paid in the
mm,
financial sector and non-financial, they follow their heart. Very few.
mm.
They'll always complain and bitch. It's a horrible place here. But I call back 10 years, they're still doing the same thing and still complaining.
Yeah.
Few leave. Maybe most of the people on this call have all reached that fork in the road and said, I'm done, I'm out of here.
Mm.
um, but it's not easy. I mean, you made even a more radical decision. Correct me if I'm wrong. You moved out of your expensive luxury condo, which I'm exaggerating a bit, and then you kind of went down to basics because you're not going to have the 40,000 coming in every week. Not that it ever did, but and completely changed. At the same time, you're doing these ultra marathons. So
Mm.
it wasn't just I'm out of here and I'm gonna try to develop a new game.
Mm.
Same time, I realized I'm gonna have to buckle up, or
Mm.
tighten the belt. So
Yeah.
few people do that, and I admire you that you do that. I'm quite surprised that you still remain quite polite.
Well, maybe let me unpack that a little. And I really welcome questions, by the way. Like if people want to dig deeper, because sometimes I realize I kind of gallop along, like I've there was a first part of the sentence that I didn't say out loud, kind of thing. So please do ask me to fill in the blanks. But let me get to brass tacks a little bit here, because like first of all, I'm on my own. I don't have like a spouse who pays my bills while I kind of play in the monkey bars.
I thought it
I
was
don't
the other
have.
way around. I thought you were paying for your partner.
Yeah, we can double back to that at some point. But that I'm in a new chapter now, and yeah, so I don't have a trust fund. I'm not independently wealthy. I have to pay my bills, and I don't have like magical rain making system that I use to pay my bills. So let me be like really basic right now. Like, so
Yeah.
what is my income? Like, how am I paying my bills? What am I doing? What is my job? And then I actually want to explain a little bit more where the lightheartedness comes from, if I may.
Yeah.
But let me be super practical for a moment. So I said off the top probably something like I'm an independent coach and advisor.
Mhm.
I write and sometimes I speak. Well, I do some one-on-one coaching, and I love doing one-on-one coaching, and I love doing like one-on-two or one-on-three coaching, like with mini cohorts. Partly because it's more affordable for the coachees, because it doesn't take me more time, but it gives them a little bit more support and camaraderie. I'm not your average coach, and I think coaching, by the way, is really evolving for all kinds of good reasons. Because I think humanity is evolving, and what we're inviting into our consciousness is evolving. And so the way people are seeking and adapting is evolving. And I am part of that evolution. I'm evolving. I'm changing a lot. And people ask me to support them. So I don't typically have a lot of coaching clients at any one time, partly because I don't think I'm for everyone, and partly just practically coaching is very intense. But I do some coaching. I'm not the cheapest coach in town, but what I do, and I'd love to do more, by the way. So if folks are interested, what I do is there's two key pieces that people come to me for. One is navigating the exit. Like, I see all this sustainability stuff. It sounded really ambitious, but I see that it's not really helping. And I do want to say more very specifically about why it's not helping, but bear with me for a sec. So I'll kind of work with people to understand, like, what is their current role and where are they really suited to play more aligned with an economy that works in service of life. That's a big piece of it, because there's a lot of mechanics there to navigate, and a lot of listening, like just compassionate understanding of where we are and how we got here. And then the other piece that I really love helping people with, and I've seen like people come to me for this, and I've realized it's kind of just common sense to me, but it's not common sense to others, is how to really collaborate with the more than human world as teachers, as guides. I don't pretend to be like, the indigenous wisdom keeper, but I have been consulting with the river for quite a while on how to do what I need to do. That 5-day run I went on, I crossed 14 bridges. Each of those was a waterway. Each was a passage to learning. And I came back with answers to things I didn't even know I was asking. I believe we're born with the most powerful technology on earth, which is called intuition. And then we aren't invited to use that tool for most of our lives. And in fact, many of us who do use it actively are kind of ridiculed, right? Like, see also witch hunt. So most of us are already tapped in some way, shape, or form. That's why there's a whole industry, I think, around like ecotourism that's tapping into this natural affinity, but it's not an industry, and it's not a siloed thing you do for 10 days when you have the time off. It's how we are all the time. We are constantly in relation with trillions of other organisms. And to think that we, meanwhile, live the rest of our lives in isolation is cuckoo. So that's just kind of how I roll. And I think it's part of our professional evolution. So my coaching practice, I work with people to help them understand where they're at, how they got there, and where they want to go. And I have different ways of going about that. So that is one way that I generate revenue. Another way that I generate revenue is I write. And I'm on two platforms. I'm on Medium and I'm on Substack. And I want to say a little bit about what I'm doing there, partly because if it's helpful for people, I'd love for people to be helped. Also because if people have feedback about ways I can do this better so that it's more useful, like I'm not doing it for entertainment, I would love to hear it. Medium, I'm kind of exploring the conceptual side of things, like a bit of a where are we now, broader observations. I wrote a piece the other day that kind of caught a little more fire than pieces for me, called something like, is our civilization going to collapse? And if yes, what do I do about it? And of course, I mean something very specific when I say civilization, and I'm not a collapsologist, and I never post photos of like fire, but I do think, we need to sit with what's going on and who are we in it. So I do a fair bit of that over on Medium. On Substack, I take the observations I'm making around ESG and sustainability. I try to make them as crisp and specific as possible. And I provide a very specific insight that is according to me and me only, but I'm hoping it's useful, about what I would do about it. So I kind of pretend that I'm consulting I call it the material world, my Substack. And in the material world, I'm behaving as a consultant. So I'm learning, I'm listening, I'm analyzing, I'm sorting out information as best I can. and then I'm providing it back into the world as if I'm presenting to the executive team. But it turns out the executive team for me are the migratory species, and it's November here, so most of the winged migration has passed Montreal, but it's still on its way. Some of you may be on active flyways. So those are my kind of lead advisors. The St. Lawrence River is one of my most important executives and mentors. And so I sort of proceed as if I'm presenting to them, but I'm hoping that it's useful to other humans. And I package that stuff up. Some of it is behind a paywall. Some of it, I'm actually still figuring it out. So I don't earn a lot there. If I had 100 times the followers and engagers that I have there, I could pay my bills. But at the moment, I really learn a lot doing that. And I'd say I pay my bill, not plural, but, and then lastly, I put myself forward as an invited speaker. And back in the day, when I was a more conventional sustainability consultant, I got invited a fair bit. I was like part of a lot of teams and whatever. And so I got brought onto a fair number of stages, and I really enjoyed it. And I kind of went into my virtual garage for the last couple of years just to kind of like really unplug from that, gain a sense of, wait, where do I want to go? Where do I want to bring my voice? And how do I want to get paid, to be really blunt? And now I'm sort of coming back out as a speaker. So if anybody has any really cool events coming up where they know that there are speakers needed, that is how I pay my bills. And I will be very candid and say it's been an adventure. Like, I have had to get really savvy and lean and be willing to take great big deep breaths and leaps of faith and make some difficult choices. And that'll probably evolve. So that's for me to figure out. I don't think I have a right to comfort over and above anyone else. I think I've lived very, very well, and I'm grateful for what I have experienced. And so what happens to me next financially, by the way, my backup plan is, if I need to, I will waitress. Like, I will not go back into doing corporate work that feels like it's fueling the problem. I will wait tables, which I did a bit up at my sister's brewery, or I will do like kind of wage work if I need to, like if I'm going to sink into debt. That's what I would do. I wanted to say really specifically the kind of content that I am driving forward, because what I hear some people saying is like, oh yeah, I totally hear you about sustainability. Like, there's a lot going on out there, but people just aren't ambitious enough. Like, we need to see more net zero. We need to see, X, Y, Z. And I just want to be really clear in saying what I have seen as the most ambitious sustainability work, I think, is actually part of the problem. And I spend a fair bit of my time, like the Material World Substack that I just mentioned is very focused on, to be blunt and a little bit not polite, like proving why mainstream sustainability is harmful. And I'm not doing it to like stick it to the man or be like, Coca-Cola is greenwashing, but more to say, look, if we think this is good, and this is what we're incentivizing with so-called ESG and impact investing, if we think more of this will solve the problem, then we're doing exactly what Dana Meadows said in her great article that gets passed around a lot, 12 places to intervene in a system, leverage points, where she talks about how in these organizations where they're seeing the kind of systemic moving parts and they're like, oh yeah, we got to make changes, and they identify even the right place where the changes need to be made, and they push really hard in the wrong direction. That is sustainability. Why don't I give a couple super concrete examples right now, just in case people are like, but wait, but net zero is good. Here come two. Global meat company JBS. It's really fun to poke holes in greenwash, but honestly, I've looked very close at them, and I've looked very close at a lot of other companies.
I might not know who they are, so you might
want
to.
JBS is a Brazilian-based global meat company, largest protein company in the world. They get kind of trashed for greenwashing, but to be really honest, I don't think they're any more greenwashy than pretty much any other company. Like, their disclosures are very convoluted and kind of immature for a global company of that size. But when you peel back the layer, there's just as much there as there is for most other companies. So what I'm about to talk about is not greenwash. It's the problem with a lot of net zero. I'm really keen to see things that are a good example. I'm going to tell you a bad example. times 2. They are pushing for net zero by, I actually forget the date, it might be 2040, future moment. And there's lots of ways in which their science-based targets are going to add up to this net zero. One of the ways, they have a whole chart, and you can kind of look at how it's broken down, just like many other companies. One of the ways is they're issuing sustainability bonds. And the proceeds of those bonds are tied to things that are considered climate aligned and part of their net zero target. Okay, sounds good. So far, we see a lot of that. So then you go digging into, so what is the money being spent on? And this is where I really want to ask people, like, what is changing? Because just saying emissions are being reduced is like, what? Like, what is changing? Okay, here's what's changing with the proceeds of those sustainability bonds being issued by JBS. This is just one part of their net zero, but it's indicative of the thing. They are increasing their capacity to produce biofuels. They have a biofuels facility in Brazil, and they're increasing their capacity to produce biofuels. You could debate, do I like biofuels, do I not like? Well, let's go a little further. What is changing? They're creating these biofuels from the oil of soy. The soy is being grown conventionally. Now we are producing more soy to create biofuels that will check the green energy box in the EU. And this is all in their public disclosure. So I'm paraphrasing, and it's footnoted in some assessments I've done, but this is all public information. I'm not that behind the scenes. So what has changed? We've grown more conventional soy. That's what's changed. And now I can hear the arguments, well, but if it offsets fossil fuel, that's not on the table. All we can see is what's changed, more conventional soy. If it's really offsetting fossil fuels, then what we need to see is fossil fuels are going down. But they aren't claiming we lowered fossil fuels. They're just claiming we increased biofuels. When you follow the change, you have more conventional soy, which I would say is not life affirming. Let me give you an example here closer to home. Net zero. Canada has a net zero policy nationally. And one of the practices is if you buy an electric vehicle, you get a $5,000 rebate. Well, what changes there? People who have the means to buy new cars get $5,000 tucked in their pocket, and more cars go on the road. Right? Like, I don't own a car. Can I please have $5,000 to take public transit, right? Or to get new shoes? Like, this is nonsense to pay people to get an EV. And I can hear the chirpers going, well, but it's better that they buy that than the other car. No, it's actually not. It is not better to put more cars on the road. And if you really want to make that argument, could you just make it over to the side where you're not pretending that that's part of a net zero plan? Right. This is all over the place. When I dig into the proceeds of climate aligned bonds, when I dig into the net zero practices, and I just ask myself, what is changing? As best as I can see it, sometimes you just can't even find it. It's super vague, but as best as I can see it, more metals are being mined, more products are being pushed into the consumer marketplace, more cars are going onto the roads. And this is the last one I'll give, and then I'll tell you how I come out of it, by the way. Let me give one more example, because another thing we're seeing is more LEED certified buildings that are energy efficient, made with sustainable products, but they're being built ever more. And I don't know where you are. I'm in the city of Montreal, which looks like Craneville. All these cities are Craneville, right? Condos going up everywhere. Yes, that's a very cool bike site. I hope they can use recycled metals. But anyways, let's go one more example where sustainability, I'm sorry, but it's broken and it's perpetuating harm. But there is something we're going to do about it. But I really want you to hold, this isn't isolated examples. This isn't greenwash. This isn't a few bad actors. This is how sustainability as an industry functions. And I didn't walk away from $200,000 a year and 20 years of learning in this career because I think it's entertaining. I walked away because I could see that I was getting paid to perpetuate harm. Like, I really mean it. So I'm not just a bit irritated about some bad examples. You've heard me mention migratory birds. I really love birds, and I think they're amazing. They're just these like incredible creatures that, yeah, it's more I can say about how they teach us. But anyway, it's migratory season. Just a few weeks ago, there was an article by one of the organizations that tracks the migratory flyway, and they help people around the world report sightings, like who's flying over when, and then also the death count in cities because birds strike buildings. So do bats and other migratory species. And they strike those buildings because the buildings are tall in their flyways and the lighting disrupts their ability to navigate. So in Chicago, the other week, first week of October, there was one of the largest bird strike incidents in measured history. Of course, there weren't that many before because there weren't that many tall buildings. But also this was a convergence of a few different weather events that kind of channeled the birds into a particular corridor. And so it was a devastating bird strike for a number of migratory species. Well, Chicago has over 71% of its office tower space, its commercial space, certified green. Those are LEED certified buildings. Those are buildings that they're not all LEED certified, but certified in some way green. The per square footage price to lease those buildings is higher because of those green certifications. And, I get a bit twitchy about this. This isn't just like, the poor birdies. It's like, no, those buildings were built to increase dollars per square foot. And then a few boxes were checked to say, but the wood was sustainably harvested. And by the way, FSC certified, it can still be clear cut and covered with pesticides. So bullshit. It's bullshit.
Hey,
yeah, you get me irritated and not polite. So these are not isolated incidents. These are structural norms built into the existing incentives. And if we can't be honest about that, we're going to keep propagating the problems. So do you want to weigh in or shall I take us back up?
No. I totally agree. I don't know if you've ever heard of Simon Michaux.
Sure. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, here's a guy who wrote an 800-page and 700-page report. How much stuff do we need to dig out of the earth to fully transition? It ain't there. It's not there. And I agree with you totally on EVs. I am a big, the opposite of fan. I really dislike them with a passion because I started to look at, how much do cars travel on average? Mm-hmm. In the US, 50% of the cars travel less than 10 kilometers. Mm-hmm. On average in the world, it's 40 kilometers a day. And most cars are parked 20 to 24 hours. So we're doing all this mining, digging infrastructure for something that's hardly being used when public transport never makes money. And the only reason why all of this money is going to unicorns, EVs, and all, it's only because they're chasing unicorns. It's not about climate at all. So I totally agree with you. And just one tip. I think it's important that everyone and yourself really speak the radical truth and not try to be accepted in the club. I was invited by the Hong Kong Bay Area Authority to come speak in the Netherlands, and they had all their guys. And I was really the weirdo over there because they were all rah, we're doing sustainability ESG. And I told the woman who's head of the family office for Hong Kong, I said, lady, nobody is coming back to Hong Kong from family offices. One, forget it. They're not coming back. They already got their money out of there and they ain't coming back. And secondly, this whole nonsense that there's 50 trillion going into ESG. If that was the case, there would be no need for any of our work. There would be climate change would have been fixed. It's not going in there. So definitions, as you're saying, I totally agree with it. We need more George Carlins, and less rah-rah people. We need to really speak this radical truth, and it's important. And any chance I get that I can get you on the stage to speak your radical truth and also pay for your time, you'll be the first that we call. And I'm glad that you brought up the Brazilian meat guy. And I'm not vegan. I'm not vegetarian. And yesterday I visited a completely strange Dutch company that is completely disrupting the entire food system, starting with eggs. Just simple story. And it was an egg farmer. And he said, it's so bad how the system is. We're growing all this food. So he developed a completely different model of, almost free range, but he told me there's no point. If free range means they have to be able to go like so many thousand
Hmm.
meters. The chickens don't walk 1,000 meters. They
Hmm.
just go short distance. And he used 90% waste food. So 90% of the food that would be normally thrown away is used to feed the chickens. And they run it on solar panels. So it's a 60% lower CO2 emissions. They don't grow food to feed the chicken. It's only like they have some vitamins and some oil, but 90% is just waste material, waste that people throw away or industrial throw away. Unfortunately, in Europe, I didn't know you're not allowed to collect waste food from retail customers. So you only in Japan they can do that. So the
Wow.
law has to be changed. And I was just very impressed with the guy who's just trying to completely change the way that the food system is, where we should not be growing so much of this food just to feed, pigs and cattle and stuff like that.
Yeah, so you're making me. I like to share a couple lenses that I use because, uh, so I kind of just threw a lot of really negative stuff at you all, and I'm grateful.
Great.
And I
Great.
see some encouraging emojis, so thank you. And I only want to go so far down the like it really sucks track because that's not necessarily productive. And by the way, like it really sucks. Like I could go on. I spent a couple of years digging around and like how bad does it suck? But that can be paralyzing. And so I want to share a few techniques that I have both to discern like when am I just like wallowing, and then also what do I do about it? Because wallowing is no fun. And
No.
flashback to a few minutes ago when I said my vision is an economy that works in service of life. It's not an economy that has a bunch of people kvetching. Like it's a much better zone. So I want to make a few distinctions, and this is quite personal. Like this is some of my sort of learning as I've gone, and I'll leave as many breadcrumbs as I can in case folks find this helpful. The first is just to notice what's the difference between help and relief. Because when things seem really stressful, like some of this stuff is, let's face it, really stressful, and we're pretty privileged to be sitting here having this conversation about how bad it is. I think each of us in our own ways across our lives will and or are and have already experienced difficult episodes of more or less personal, like closer or further scales, health or other things. So, no one has a lock. I certainly don't have a lock on like how to handle suffering. But I can
Mm.
say that when we take a lot of this stuff in, it can connect to a lot of suffering of our own and the wider world. And so we understandably react to that. And there is a sense of wanting relief. And I can really appreciate that. And I don't judge anybody for seeking relief in whatever way they do, including like forget the whole thing, or I'm just going to watch Netflix, or I'm going to drink a lot, or do whatever. That's like, okay, seek relief if you need to. But notice that relief isn't the same as help. And help, for me, the distinction I make is help is about changing things. So if I'm really suffering, if I'm really feeling overwhelmed and not good, then maybe relief actually isn't helping. Maybe it's perpetuating the thing that's causing those feelings. And maybe what I need is help, i.e., some way to change. That's a bigger question that touches a lot of things. But I signal that because I think when you were asking Bobby, like, not everyone makes the leap or whatever. I think like I was doing what a lot of us, I think we've been trained to do culturally. We've been incentivized and encouraged to just seek relief, go on vacation, get your work-life balance sorted. And I don't agree with that anymore. I don't judge it. And I did what I did, and I'll probably keep doing what I do, and we all will. But I'm now trying to really be clear, like, was I just trying to make myself a little more comfortable because it hurt? Or was I actually changing something? And so now I am doing what I can to actually change something.
Mhm.
So that, ironically, is relieving. It's like getting out of a bad relationship. You try and try and try to fix things and talk about it and get help, but actually maybe that just needed to end. And when it does, there's a sense of relief. So just put that kind of relief help thing up as a lens. Now I'm going to go a little deeper into, so what does that mean in terms of my work? Because these intractable problems that like my vision is an economy that works in service of life. Nobody called me yesterday and was like, hey, Lorraine, can we get a new economy from you? And can you deliver it by next Tuesday? Like I'm not that powerful, right? So
Yes, you are.
Well,
Don't
thank you.
underestimate yourself.
But it's not on me to do it all myself, and that wouldn't be realistic or desirable. And so, how do I navigate these intractable depths of complexity? I'm going to share two lenses. Happily, I have two on my face, so we can pretend one is each. And then I have like a technique for remaining motivated as I go forward. And maybe that'll kind of bring us home. And I'm really happy to see more, like any more questions and thoughts. My two lenses are, I'm going to use two words that are really kind of freighted, but I'll unpack them. Decolonial and right relationship. I guess that was three words. And by decolonial, so I try to hold a decolonial lens. That word's getting thrown around. It's like the new regenerative and, but let me tell you what it means for me and how I use it as a lens. When I'm observing industrial activity or my own forward steps, I'm asking who is centered. And by that, I mean who's involved in the decision-making or who's excluded from the decision-making. Who is harmed from whatever's happening or who is benefiting. So just like that could be tiny, right? It could be like as I'm walking down the street or going into the grocery store, or it could be like as I'm analyzing the largest meat company in the world. And I won't know everything absolutely because I'm just one person absorbing the information through my own set of biases. But at the very least, I'm asking who is centered, who is harmed, or who is benefiting. And when I say who, I always mean humans and the more than human world. And just by asking that, I'm more likely, like when I look back to the materiality assessments, there was none of that. It was kind of like, where is compliance needed so that we don't breach, human rights norms? Okay, that's a fine question, but why not just come right out and say, like, who's benefiting from this deal? And maybe it'll be a great story. But if we aren't even asking, we are perpetuating a very colonial mindset. And to me, colonial means like, I showed up with the solution because I know better, and here it is. Even if I'm well-intended or trying to develop or fight climate change, I'm a colonial bastard if I show up with the solution and I have not asked who is harmed, who is benefiting, and listen to the answer. Not like, no, this is good for you guys. Like, shut up. What do I know about what's good for you, So the decolonial lens is a very important one for me. And I'm learning every nanosecond about where I've been in that journey and where I can go forward. The other one is the right relationship one. This is a big one because, I mentioned we're always in relation to trillions of organisms, whether we're conscious or not of that. So how do I show up with myself, with my community, and with the wider world? And, this is a tougher one because, again, we've been trained, like, get a good job, pay your bills, be successful, like, be liked, be all those things. And we've been trained in a very kind of Prussian, no offense to Prussians, but like the collective education system is highly militarized in the sense of like, sit down, be quiet, memorize stuff. The better you memorize it and can regurgitate it on the other side, the better job you're going to get. And there you get to serve the economy. And nowhere along that line, for most people, not all, but most of us, was there the question of like, how do you feel about that? Not like, what do you want to be when you grow up, but like, how do you feel? Where does it sit in your body? What kind of dreams do you have when you're sleeping? Like, how do you feel when you get up in the morning? What's working? What's not? Where are you serving yourself? Not out of selfishness, like me, but like, how can I be well? Because if I'm not well, put your own oxygen mask on first, right? If I'm not well, then I'm not well suited to help others be well, to look after others in my community. Or if I am, it's out of some kind of duty, which can lead to resentment and anger and in it. So how am I showing up with myself in care and love so that I can show up with others in care and love? And that's kind of sticking with the human community. But when you widen that and say, and how am I showing up in the wider world? Suddenly you get to ask questions like, well, what is going on in the wild? Oh, it is migratory season, isn't it? And, where are they going? And where do they get to next? And this is just endless questions. I mean, like, it just sparks this like expansive feeling. I'll give you a concrete example of that, and then I'll land with my motivational techniques. Birds and their migration. I might have mentioned them once or twice already in this talk. Why are they so compelling to me? Well, people will ask me, well, how are you going to solve for, all these really big problems? I'm like, I'm not so sure. I have ideas and I write about them and do my best to put real insights out there. But if I ever feel doubtful about the capacity to figure this path out, I call it the sort of the path of industrial healing, like industry healing itself at an industrial scale, industrial healing. I look at migratory birds and I think, well, if you look at the path they go, and probably folks here know more than I do, but if you look at the path they traverse, it's often thousands of kilometers over numerous different climatic circumstances from beginning to end. Some of them, it will be their first time. There's this, like, they don't know where they're going, but they know where they're going, right? Like, they just go. And I don't know what's in the mind of the, black cap night heron, black crown night heron. He doesn't care what we call them. But I know that they know, like, they just go, they do it. And a bunch of them die, not just because of buildings, because it's really hard, but they're compelled onto a path that serves their lives. That is how their lives have evolved over time. So I trust that impulsion forward. I trust that it's there, that it's an instinct, and that is our most powerful technology, our intuition. And I go. Here come my lenses for staying motivated and staying positive, because, like, not positive like yay, but positive like, no, I really feel good about this. Like, I want to do it. I get up in the morning and I'm like, oh my God, I got so much to do, and I'm excited to do it, including sitting calmly and meditating. But I feel like enlightenment is not knowing; it's feeling light about the path. It's holding the light even in the, like, crazy amounts of darkness. So how? I have 3 techniques. I've written about this. So Bobby, you said I can put some links out. I'll make sure we include a link to this because it's one of the handier ones. My number one way of staying motivated, like going on the migratory path, even though I'm like, I don't know, I've never been on this path before, but they say there's something out there, is to, as much as I can, live in the paradigm I want, like live in the paradigm that I think is true. So, like, I'm on Earth, I pay my land people my rent, like they expect fiat currency and all the rest of it. So I'm not so in this whole other economic world that I'm not in this one, but wherever I can, I operate in. So for example, I said, work-life balance doesn't make sense to me. No, I just live. I live my life. And I live doing things that I think are worthy. And I do my best to be compensated in a way that I can continue to live. But I'm not willing to sign up for the old paradigm of, like, you get the best job you can. I pay my taxes, but I look at the roads that my taxes pay for, and I imagine I go on foot. I take footpaths everywhere I can, because in my paradigm of the economy that serves life, we get around mostly on our own steam. And we love it because it feels good. And we make eye contact with trees and birds, and not always, but most of the time. So I live as much as I can, not out of sacrifice, but out of a sense of kind of elegance and joy. I live in the paradigm I want to be in. So it may not be the paradigm other people want to be in, but it's the one I want to be in. So I just live in that paradigm, and it really helps me. The second thing I do is I really strive for what I would call holding complexity, but let me just put a finer point on that, on avoiding polarization. Like, there's a lot of room for polarization right now. Like, if you go down the Simon Michaud trail, and he's a really great resource, you'll find people who are like, yeah, we can't extract all those minerals and do the renewable energy transition. Like, that's going to suck. And here's all the reasons why. And it's a joke, and climate change is a joke, and we shouldn't do that. And then you've got, like, dudes, no, we got to triple down on this. And it can get quite feisty. And you have people very emotional about what we should or shouldn't do on climate. I have very low tolerance for that. When I see, no offense, but when I see a Guardian article with flames, I'm like, ugh, like, that is not helpful. Doom scrolling is not helpful. Pouring gasoline on the emotional fire is not helpful. I avoid that. I take in almost no mainstream news at all. If a friend or trusted person says, hey, I think you might find this interesting, I'll almost always read it, but I sign up for no media. I've done 3 global media company strategy companies for 3 different companies. I won't say who, but let's just say it covers the full spectrum of what we see out there. And having gone into the belly of that beast between 2014 and 2019, I was just like, oh, that's why I'm never touching mainstream media of any sort, not because of that view or that view, just like the whole thing is an entertainment mess. With almost no exceptions. And if there's good stuff out there, I hear about it eventually and I'm glad to see it. But otherwise, there's lots else to do. So very important second lens. I do everything in my power to limit polarization and stay really open. I believe multiple things are true at the same time. And it's really valuable for me to hear why you feel super strongly this way and you feel super strongly that way, and just listen. And if I ever doubt that, again, wonderful natural world around me reminds me it's broad daylight here, it's pitch darkness somewhere else. I'm on the very same planet with the very same human population having a polarized experience. So just holding that is very empowering and very enlightening, because you start to see the cosmic joke after a while. Like, it's this way. No, it's this way. Oh, look at that. It's all those ways and a whole bunch of others. And then the third thing, which I've referenced a few times, is I really do all I can to stay open to the more than human world and to other ways of being and kind of imitating them. So like I just copy others that are way further ahead of me and try that on, like, oh, that seems to be working for them. What would that be like? I do that with my running. Like I run with people who are way better than me. And I've, as a result, like I took an hour off my marathon time. I wasn't trying that hard, I now know. So likewise, beyond humans, I just seek out more than humans. And I'm like, how are you handling this? Mm-hmm. And I just listen and I learn. So I live in the paradigm I want. I embrace complexity, like truly embrace it as wholly as I'm emotionally capable. I get caught up sometimes. And then I just imitate those that are already way ahead of me and try to keep up.
How can we help you?
Oh, wow. Thank you for that question. Well, you can offer feedback on what I'm doing in the material world, where I'm trying to make it super useful. So comments, etc. You can share it. If you've got, if people want to be subscribers but they can't pay, just give me your email and I'll add you in. If you've got the means and you want to subscribe, that's a great way.
Everyone can afford that. You know,
Okay.
The issue is that everybody wants to come to the party, but nobody wants to bring the chairs.
Right. Yeah. So no more pro bono work for billionaires. Is one of my.
If you give them a freebie, they'll take it, but they might not actually consume it properly.
Right. So yeah, one way to help is to, like, if what I'm putting out there is useful, like, don't do it because you feel sorry for me or you think I'm a bit quirky. Like, use it. I'm doing all I can to take 20 years plus a bunch of stuff I did before in other sectors to kind of draw down from source and create the most useful breadcrumbs I can from what I think is an economy that serves life. And so if others can pick that up and build from their perspective, from your roles, we all have different roles. And any feedback you can give me about what would be more useful, that would be great. If there's someone or someone's out there that would like to be coached and spend some focused time together, really diving in, like, how can I support you in your role, kind of unpacking where you've got pieces of this economy to bring. And for sure, if you've got an event coming up and I can give a few heads a shake, as you can see, I kind of delight in sharing what I can. So be honored to do that as well.
We didn't get to the failure or the development of the SDGs. We'll have to save that for another time, because I am very conscious, even though you're not sending out invoices for $200K a year anymore, you do have other stuff to do. So I do appreciate that. And I also, I admire very much that you go your own path, you know, and you are the migratory birds. And you'll see where, you'll figure out how you get there. You don't kind of worry about it. And I think more as people would more follow their heart, things would be a lot easier, and also easier for themselves. So I admire that you're doing that. Anything that we can do to help you in any way just let me know. The replay will be available in a few minutes. It happens very quickly. I'll send you a full copy. I'll have Sam make a kind of short clip that you can use to promote it also
Oh, thank you.
for that. And if you want to post anything on the circle about the work that you're doing, any articles, reports, or anything, or promote the Substack, or your coaching or your marathon challenges, challenge everybody to a race for 100 miles, you're always welcome to do that.
Well,
And
thank
I'm
you.
sorry that I do try to keep it 60 minutes because people, it's
Yeah, they've
always
got lives.
brilliant talking to you, but we do have lots of other stuff to do.
Of course.
And I don't want to take advantage of your good nature.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure, and I will make available the link about the motivation. I've got an article where I kind of gently pick apart the SDGs.
Oh,
I'll make
cool.
sure my Material World Substack and my newsletter link as well. I have a free newsletter that goes out every Friday where I share breadcrumbs from the trail along to industrial healing. So I'll make all that available in whatever way you tell me is the most practical. And meanwhile, thank you. Really wonderful to see some familiar voices and encouraging words, and always a pleasure to be here chatting with you, Bobby. I look forward to the next time, and thank you for all of your encouragement along the way. It's actually meant.
Yeah, you're one of the superstars. So, and you're as you say, a fine wine that for some is an acquired taste. For both, just keep an open mind. The brilliance will come through. So, thank you for being who you are.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon. Bye for now.
Stay well. Big hug. Bye-bye.